Hi and welcome to RC Modders, and today something slightly different. I had an email from those very nice people at Banggood a few days ago, and they offered to send me some stuff to review. They gave me a choice of things that I might like to start with, and one of them was this. Judging by the picture on the box, it seems to be some sort of Meccano-like thing, and you can see here that it's got a transmitter, so I guess that it's radio controlled. I shan't be doing a blow-by-blow detailed build video, but I will be putting it together and telling you exactly what I think. One of the conditions of me agreeing to do the review was that if I wanted to, I was free to modify it as much as I wanted to. So in this first video, I'm just going to build the thing stock, tell you what I think, and then possibly there'll be another video where I might try and do something interesting with it. Okay, without further ado, let's get the box open and see what we've got in here. Right, we've got instructions. They seem to be pretty comprehensive, and I really like the fact that they're showing the parts that you're using for each construction stage. It's very much like the instructions that you used to get in Lego and Meccano. This thing here seems to be some kind of plastic component to make the bucket at the front. If I am going to make any improvements to this, I have a funny feeling that this might just be replaced with something on the 3D printer. We have some motors, a battery, 3.7 volt, so that's a 1S LiPo, and it's 300 milliamp hours. 4 motors in there. We have a transmitter. Right, so this seems to be a joystick which moves around. 2-position lever there, another one there, nothing going on here, and a couple of buttons there. Loads and loads of nuts and bolts. Oh, and hopefully some tools to put them on with. Looks like a hex driver and a spanner of some sort. I did actually get these out earlier, and these are all M2.5, so if nothing else, it looks like I'm going to have a good stock of M2.5 nuts and bolts. Something else made of plastic, let's have a quick look. More cogs, gears and other plastic components. This is pretty heavy. Now on the box it says stainless steel, and it's like Meccano, but it's probably about 2/3 the size. Very nice. Then another bag of plastic parts. Oh, I see. So rather than having rubber tracks, you've actually got to make up each individual segment. I quite like the idea of that, although I suspect it's going to take me some time to put it all together. Actually, just before I do build it, I think it might be quite a good idea to test out the radio control, because I don't want to get to the end and find that actually it doesn't work, and I could have found that out in the first 5 minutes. So we'll just put the battery in. So what we seem to have here is a complete unit that houses the battery, the receiver, and whatever speed controllers it's got. So let's just put that in. So that just stays there like that. Oh, I put it wrong way around. That's it, so that clips in. I'll plug the motors in just randomly into any slot. So we've got the 4 motors. That, then the wires all come around together, and I think it's meant to clip down. I guess they push down like that. That's it, so the wires don't pull on the plugs. That's quite neat, and then this whole unit I guess just plugs onto the back. There's an on-off switch there, and similarly with the transmitter. So we need to put some batteries in this. It doesn't come with batteries for the transmitter, but that's not really a big deal. It just takes a couple of the treble A's, and so I'm going to put a couple of rechargeable ones in. Needs to have the screw put in, otherwise the cover comes off. That. Okay, so when I turn this on, we get a flashing red light, so I guess that it's trying to bind, and we've got a green light to say the power's on. Turn the receiver on, got a solid red light here, and then the light on the power button on the transmitter has also gone solid red, so I guess that we're connected. Right, let's try this stick here first. That seems to be making both of these motors work, and if I move it slowly, it seems to make the motors go more slowly. So we've got slight proportionality on it, so that's the track motors, and let's just see if I can make them work independently. So if I move the stick across and up, that's only making this motor go. And that's making this one here go. So it seems that the motor control is here, and there is at least a degree of proportionality in the speed, so that's good. Let's try this stick here now, just the 2-position switch really. That's making this motor go backwards and forwards. This one over here. Right, that seems to make the track drive motors go 4-speed backwards and forwards. I'm not sure why you would want to do that, because you can just do the same thing with the joystick here. Maybe I won't put the knob on this one if it's not needed. I won't know until I built it. And then these 2 buttons here, the 2 buttons here don't do anything. In fact, they're not buttons, but the ones over here probably will. Yep. So they're making this motor here go backwards and forwards. So I'm guessing that this stick here is probably for raising and lowering the arm, and this one here is probably for tipping the bucket. Okay, that's all good. Right, so as I said, I won't be doing a detailed build video. I might take some photos as I go along and put them in the video, we'll see. And I'll come back when I've built it. Okay, so I guess it's time for me to draw some kind of conclusion from all of this. In terms of the top 5 things which I like about the model, first of all there's the quality of the parts that go into it, and in particular I really like the tools. These are definitely enough to build the model with. I think that the instruction book is great, very easy to follow. Even though there are really no written instructions in there, the pictures are good enough. The motors in this thing are actually surprisingly powerful, obviously geared down, but the speed is good, the power is good. I think that they've got that right, and on 3.7 volts I'm quite impressed. The fourth thing really is just the cleverness of the overall design. If you watch the video carefully, where the arms are moving up and down, and so you've got the bucket angle independent from the height of the arm, etc., I think that that is really nicely done. And I think that the way that they've built these tracks, that is superb too. Often with this sort of thing you'll have rubber tracks that will keep coming off. These tracks did not try and come off once, and I was actually giving it some quite tough testing. So I think that the tracks get a definite thumbs up. And then lastly, it's actually very usable. So sometimes when you build something like this, which is kind of toy quality, you mainly build it for the challenge of actually making it. I was quite impressed with this insofar as the thing that you end up with is quite usable. It's got good play value, and it didn't fall apart when I used it, and I was using it outside on real earth, on real concrete. I wasn't just driving it around the house on carpet, etc. So I think that the usability overall is probably the top thing which I like about this. Well, it wouldn't be a balanced review if I didn't give the other side of the coin. So 5 things, I won't call them dislikes, but I'll call them things which could maybe be better. You may have noticed, if you watched through all of the photos in the build, that there was a missing part, and it was actually one of these triangle pieces here on the side, and I had to redesign the whole thing really in this area here to accommodate that, because the part that came was a smaller one. Now, I hold myself responsible for that because I didn't check all of the parts before I started, and I think that if you're buying this for somebody, or in particular if you're thinking about taking it on holiday to have as a little project or whatever, it will be very frustrating to get halfway through the model or even towards the end and find something missing. I would really recommend, as soon as you receive one of these, that you check carefully through all of the parts. There are a lot, nearly 1200 of them, and you just make sure it's all there, and if it isn't, get straight in contact with Banggood. I'm sure that they'll sort you out quickly. The second thing is that on the box it says 6+, which I guess is the age range. Now that might be true from a safety perspective, but I think a 6-year-old, even with help, would really struggle with this. It is quite fiddly to put together, and I would have said that the more appropriate age, and this is just my opinion, is probably 8 or older, and I think that even an 8-year-old would probably need some supervision and some help, but I think it will be a very satisfying thing to do for an adult and a child to build this together. Not to say that for an adult this isn't a fun little project to put together, you know, maybe something to do over the holidays. It is a challenge, not a huge challenge, but it is a challenge to put together, and if you take your time it's quite satisfying and enjoyable, probably in a similar sort of way to a jigsaw, but you get something at the end which is quite good. The third thing that I would say is that it's not really what I would call reusable. So Meccano traditionally is something that you would take apart and then you would build something else with. The bolts on here are fine for putting on once or twice. Beyond that, the hex driver is quite liable to actually burr around the holes in the top of the nuts. So I don't think that you get a great number of uses of each nut, and indeed there was one nut which I had to take out, and in order to do that I used the Dremel to slice across it so that I could put a slot head screwdriver onto it to get the bolt out. So I don't think it's tremendously reusable for making other things with, which is a little bit of a shame, and perhaps had there been slot headed bolts that would have been the case, more like Meccano, or even if they'd used a larger gauge of hex they might not have burred round so easily. The fourth thing, which is probably the only real gripe I've got with this, is the design of the bucket, and that is that the bucket, when it's in its lowered position and when the bottom of it is horizontal, is actually about 2 centimeters above the ground, which isn't great for scooping things up which are at ground level. And I think that if there was anything that I would change in the design, it would probably be this. And if I do make a second video and I start modifying this, I think that I'm probably going to design a new bucket, which obviously I'd make available for people to download. But that's probably the only thing which I didn't like about it. And then lastly, on the things which I think could be better, was that when I put this together and I first tried to use it, none of the motors would turn. I had actually mounted all of the motors too tightly in the chassis. I was able to get all of them out and address that, but it would have been useful, I think, in instructions to have told people not to do the motors up too tight, because if they bind, you're either going to get very slow movement or the motors are going to stop altogether, and then you're at risk of burning out the onboard speed controllers or even burning out the motors. And I think that I mentioned this in the photo section of this video. It's actually worth testing the motors with the receiver and the transmitter quite frequently while you're putting the thing together, just to make sure that the motors are moving freely and that there is no binding going on. It's far more difficult to address this after the build. Okay, so that's my top 5 likes and top 5 could do betters. Overall, I think that I would probably give this 8 out of 10. I think it represents good value for money. I think that there's some great innovation in there, and overall I think it gets a big thumbs up. So Banggood, thank you very much for sending this to me. I hope people have found this review interesting and useful. And until the next time, thank you very much for watching.